Hey guys, and welcome to today's video where I kind of wanted to touch upon the subject of animal hoarding with reptiles, or at least accumulating too many too quickly. I will just be filming with my geckos today. I'll try to bring in different ones to keep this kind of visually interesting. But yeah, I kind of feel like this video is like no one. Absolutely no one. Me. Let's talk about animal hoarding. But you know, I do think this is something that's brought up a lot, especially around sort of pet tube, and at the end of the day it's a real thing where animals actually do suffer, and if I can help prevent that occurring, you know, then this video is worth it. I think it's an important subject to look at. Now, I won't be necessarily looking at the actual mental disorder that is animal hoarding, as I'm not a psychiatrist, but if you're not familiar with it, this is what it consists of. An individual possesses more than the typical number of companion animals. The individual is unable to provide even minimal standards of nutrition, sanitation, shelter, and veterinary care, with this neglect often resulting in starvation, illness, and death. The individual is in denial of the inability to provide this minimum care and the impact of that failure on the animals, the household, and the human occupants of the dwelling. So, of course, if you feel this seems like something you or maybe a friend may be suffering from, then please seek professional help. Now, I wanted this video to be more light-hearted and focus more on the people getting into the hobby and how to avoid going down the route of accumulating too many reptiles too quickly and ultimately the animals suffering. As a disclaimer, this video is not about an individual or any fellow pet channels. It is purely just tips on how to prevent you buying too many reptiles too soon and becoming overwhelmed. The first tip would be to know your limits. Start with one reptile and wait. Often I find people will buy a leopard gecko and like a few weeks later they've got a cresty and then a bearded dragon and then something else, and within a year they've gone from 0 reptiles to like 20. And from an outside perspective, I can see that in my opinion this seems like too much too soon. Equally, I can see that some people want to buy from decent breeders and maybe they can only access those breeders at an expo that comes to their town maybe once or twice a year, so they get a few reptiles at once. This isn't necessarily how I'd do it, but I can sort of see why people do. But the thing is, when you have the opportunity to just own that one reptile for a bit, you get to know your own limits. You can figure out how much time you get to spend with them, how much money they're costing you, whether that's on food, supplements, equipment, even setting aside money for the vets. And when you gradually take on reptiles, you've usually had a nice amount of time to properly bond with your current pet. And though this isn't for everyone, if you wanted my opinion, I would probably recommend waiting around a year before getting another reptile. And I know there will be people who will be like, oh no, I'm already bored of my leopard gecko, I want something else. But like, this is a thing, when you take on a reptile, quite a few of them have long lifespans. A leopard gecko can live over 20 years, and that's why you shouldn't just buy a pet here and there and not really think about it. When you're taking on a leopard gecko, you're taking it on for 20 plus years, and I hate hearing people say that they're already bored of their leopard gecko and they want something else. You shouldn't have got a leopard gecko in the first place. Another thing that really bugs me, and this is linked in with knowing your own limits, and I feel like as a reptile owner, you might not see it as much, but because I get a lot of people come to me for advice, I see the good, the bad, the ugly, and I think even fellow pet YouTubers will see this. Regardless of the animal they are talking about, they will probably see a similar sort of pattern in this comment. But I will get people who say, oh, my gecko's really unwell. They show me a picture of their gecko, they show me a picture of the setup. Their gecko needs to see a vet and their setup definitely needs to be upgraded because it's tiny and it doesn't even reach the minimum requirements. And they're like, oh, I can't afford to upgrade the setup, I can't afford the vets. But then the following week they tell me they want to get a bearded dragon or something, and you're just like, if you can't afford an upgrade, if you can't afford the vets or supplements or proper equipment, don't just move on to another animal because it's not going to get cheaper. And I think there's one respect, like there's people who take on animals quite quickly, but the animals are always cared for and healthy, and there are people like this who are not even providing the minimum for their reptiles, but they get bored and move on. And that was a massive inspiration for making this video. Now, the next tip, and this isn't for everyone, but it would be to work or volunteer at a rescue or rehabilitation centre for reptiles. Now, if you feel this may encourage you to adopt more reptiles, that would be counterproductive, so maybe avoid this one. But if you want to hang out with reptiles, help them out, feed them, clean up the setups, this is a perfect way of having reptiles in your life, helping out a rescue and rehabilitation centre, and having reptiles without the responsibility of having them as a permanent pet. Another similar tip is to work in a reptile shop. Once again, if you feel this could trigger you to buy more reptiles, then avoid. But the good thing about this is you'll get experience with a range of reptiles. You may, if you're well informed, be able to educate the public about certain reptiles. And actually, if there's a reptile you've been wanting for ages, and then you get to interact with it like on a daily basis and you realise this probably isn't actually the pet for me, then that could be a great insight, and in some ways, you would have dodged a bullet there. Now, you get paid for feeding, cleaning, hanging out with the reptiles, educating the public and everything, and you may even get discount on reptile supplies, which is always good. The fourth and final tip, and I think this is probably one of the reasons I don't have tons of animals, is to refocus that want or need for more pets and put that passion and money into improving their setups and way of life. So for me, I'm gradually replacing heat mats with deep heat projectors. I use UV lights for my leopard geckos, and I have to replace them yearly, which costs me around, if not more than £50, I think, because I also have one for my chihuahua. I want to eventually go bioactive with all my tanks, and all of this costs money, it takes time, and honestly I think trying to improve the quality of your reptiles' lives, the quality of their setup, not only impacts them in a positive way but also yourself. So get on Pinterest, look up naturalistic or bioactive tanks, get inspired and make these upgrades little projects for yourself. Now, there are some amazing reptile or pet rooms on YouTube, and I know I've mentioned him before, but Tanner from Serpa Design has an amazing animal room. Each terrarium, whether it has an animal in or not, is incredible. Now, we may not all be quite as talented as Tanner in terms of terrarium building, but we can all certainly try and embrace not only our animals, but live plants and even their cleanup crew. In some ways, once you're focusing more on upgrading equipment, their tanks, maintaining these awesome natural dwellings, you realise how expensive and time consuming taking on another reptile could be. So in turn, you take more time to figure out what animals you really want, or at least this is what I do. So when people say to me, hey, you're going to get a bearded dragon, or hey, you should get a snake, it's like, I don't really want either. So no, after I don't buy my animals for YouTube, even though people have actually said to me, you should buy a ball python or you should buy a bearded dragon because that helps boost views. It's like, that's not my priority. My animals are my priority. Like, I have 6 reptiles. The first one I bought 13 years ago, and the last one I bought was over 2 years ago now, and sadly by reptile YouTuber standards, I probably don't have many reptiles and I don't buy new ones frequently enough to be overly entertaining to some people. But at the end of the day, I'm very happy with the close bond I have with my animals, how I'm always trying to improve on their care and their setup, and for me personally, I would get way too overwhelmed if I had too many reptiles. So yeah, I guess this was a bit of food for thought. I kind of feel like this can become a problem, especially with reptiles, since some, like snakes for example, don't necessarily have to be fed very often, and people insist on putting them in tubs. I don't know if this is a good thing or bad thing. I'm not overly knowledgeable on snakes, to be honest with you, but to me, in some cases, it does feel like people almost collect them like Pokemon or something, like, oh, you can get it in this colour and that colour and this type of one, and it's almost like the animals are seen as accessories, and it's kind of sad because a lot of them just end up going in a tub and away, and it's sad to see. I will say though, I am happy to see more people getting into naturalistic or bioactive tanks and really embracing the environment that animals are kept in. I've seen more shops offering a range of live plants and driftwood, branches, cork. I don't know if it's just in the UK, but I have seen more and more shops both online and in store do this, which I think is awesome. It just shows to me that the reptile hobby is moving in a much more positive direction. Now, I can certainly imagine people sat there right now, or even commenting right now, saying, you know, why should I bother with a bioactive or naturalistic tank? It costs me more, which means I can't get more animals, and my pet will still be alive if I keep it in a tub. But we have to understand and respect that these animals are complex creatures, and at the very least, they should be allowed to thrive in captivity. After all, owning a pet isn't a necessity. Like, you don't need a pet. You choose to take that on, and it should be thought of as more of a privilege. No animal has asked to be your pet and live in a tub its entire life. So you have to have more respect for your pets and allow them to thrive. I'd also like to mention, before I go, that this video was also kind of inspired by Reptilian Garden's video on this subject, so I will link that video below if you want to check it out. But yeah, as I said at the beginning, this is not directed at an individual or a channel. Everyone has their own limits. Looking after 20 stick insects, for example, is not the same as looking after 20 horses. Like, we can't put a number on the perfect amount of animals to own. Everyone is different. Every animal's needs are different. So this is just me trying to make sure no one gets lost and ends up overwhelmed with a bunch of reptiles they can't properly care for. And in turn, not only do the animals suffer, but sometimes the owner does too. But anyway, I hope this video has helped. If you haven't already, please subscribe and be sure to hit that notification bell so you actually get my videos in your subscription box. But yeah, thanks for watching guys, and goodbye.